As friends we gather, hearts are true. Spirits near, we call to you. Is there a spirit here?
Welcome to the Podcast Compels You, the show where we are given curse categories by our evil AI chatbot, tasked with finding movies that fit those categories and sharing them with you horror-loving humans. I'm Bill, and with me, as always, is my co-host Stacy. How are you, Stacy?
Happy birthday, America! Now I've dated the
I was
episode.
just gonna say, come on. I was gonna say we're celebrating something today. I wasn't gonna say what.
uh, I'd like to say hola to our one listener in Portugal.
Hola!
We
Thank you.
appreciate you so much.
Yes, we owe everything to you
I wish
thus
I knew
far.
more words in Portuguese. Sorry
Oh, we
about
should we
that.
should have studied up on that
Next time.
next time. So Stacy, you've been watching a lot of stuff, I hear. What do you got?
Yes. Well, I've been traveling once again, so I haven't been to the theater. I sure hope the financial losses from my absence are not too devastating to my local Alamo Draft House.
Oh,
I know. While traveling, I did do a handful of streaming views, and I had so much to say about them that I'm actually going to save three of them for next time. But I thought it would be appropriate tonight to mention that I watched Tarot, which you might remember I had planned to watch in the theater, but I was prevented from doing so by a diluvial act of God. Have you seen this one yet?
no, is that 2024? Like just recent?
Yeah, I think it was just released this year. Yeah.
No, I have not seen it. No.
And I feel public like y'all misled me on this one. Tarot is not nearly as bad as I thought based on the negative reviews. Like it is formulaic, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. Formulas can be really fun.
True.
I like the haunted house formula. I like the possession formula. These are, things that we come to rely on, and they're comfy. And it's like you know what you're getting into. You get what you expect. Everybody has a good time.
Sure.
It doesn't always have to be something mind-blowing. But also, I think this movie had a pretty good self-aware sense of humor that I wasn't expecting based on reviews. And also, like, I think viewers who complained so much about like the cliches, they're just like not in on the joke. Tarot's also been criticized for being tame on the scares. This is another kind of thing that bugs me about horror movies in general. And this is particularly relevant for tonight's movie. Honestly, like no matter how good a PG-13 movie is, it always gets dissed a certain amount just for its rating.
Is Tarot a PG-13?
It is.
Okay,
And
I was going to ask you
as
that because
yeah, as we discussed before on this show, it's absolutely meaningless. But anyway, I have a handful of things to say about Tarot that might make wider points about these movies in general, if you humor me.
yeah.
Point A, Tarot has some really good scares. If you end up watching it, there's some shit with a ladder that's pretty scary.
Hmm.
I think PG-13 movies can be scary as hell. I'm going to give you another example in a minute. And anyway, is it not okay for the genre to include many levels of scary? Is it not okay for less scary movies to exist? Like, I feel like that's what some of the complainers are getting
Mhm.
at the bottom line. And no matter what movie it is, also, like, there are always people that complain it's not scary. Like, Terrifier wasn't scary. I don't believe you. And it's so subjective anyway.
Scary is a very general word, and I think there's so many other things to horror movies that can be effective that maybe you don't have to categorize as scary.
Right. Also true. Dread, disgust.
Dread, yes. Just things that leave you feeling a little like off or like just something. Some things just get under your skin, but they're not necessarily scary. It's hard to explain when you come across one. It hits the right way.
Maybe uncanny.
Sure, I like that. Uncanny.
Point B, this movie did have like a couple of delightfully humorous and kind of meta moments. It was no Scream 6, don't get me wrong, but I was also like, these Gen Z kids are all right. Um, it was doing its own thing. All right, point C. I find myself saying a lot lately, like we need PG-13 movies. We need gateway movies to get
Yes.
kids into horror. We need movies that kids are allowed to see, which I think parents are a lot stricter now than they were when we were kids watching all the movies.
Oh, yeah.
My parents were pretty strict, but like I still had cousins. I could go to their house and watch anything.
Sure.
I saw Alien when I was really little. That memory has come back to me recently.
Hmm.
Like, if we want the genre to stay as hot as it is now, if we want to have years like 2024 with its bounty of theatrical releases, we need PG-13 movies to lure in general audience members who might be scared of R-rated horror for, reasons. Nobody's forcing anybody to see PG-13 movies, Redditors. Some of y'all need a hobby, like a different hobby, like maybe touch grass, as some of y'all are so fond of saying to each other. In conclusion, overall, I thought it was an enjoyable watch with some fun little surprises and recommend it if you're not a stick in the mud Redditor. Okay, done with that. Done with them.
You've given me some things to think about for tonight's film, even honestly, because you've addressed a few things that definitely have seeped into my mind while I was kind of watching this and reviewing it. So, yeah,
Right. I
I
was like,
appreciate
this
that.
is perfect timing for this
Yeah.
for this movie.
Hmm.
And that leads me to my next one. I rewatched The Ring 2002.
Oh, wow.
Also PG-13. Can you
Yes.
believe it? I could not at the time. I
I
could not
can
believe it.
because I actually looked up a list of PG-13 horror movies because I'm like, what have I seen that I may not have known was PG? And I was actually surprised by a few, but sorry, continue.
Yeah, it just gives me the opportunity to mention that I credit The Ring, along with like maybe The Exorcism of Emily Rose,
Hmm.
as being like one of the formative titles that cemented my lifelong affinity for this genre, especially supernatural horror. I've seen it so many times, but it had now been like quite a while, like maybe 10 years since I
Hmm.
hadn't seen it. And it's actually only one of a handful of movies that I will watch again. I usually don't
Hmm.
rewatch unless it's for a purpose, like the evil AI is making me do it for a podcast. You never know when that might happen.
Right.
When I first saw this movie, it was absolutely hands down one of the scariest things I'd ever seen, if not the scariest, no exaggeration. Now, of course, it no longer has that effect. A lot of its tricks and effects have also been imitated by other movies for so long, so it doesn't have that original like bite that it did. But it holds up in a lot of ways, and I hope that it continues to provide that holy shit, this is terrifying experience for newcomers for many years to come.
Did the effects hold up, would you say?
I mean, to me, but also I feel like I'm forgiving of that when I'm
Okay.
watching older movies.
Okay. And some people find like effects of a certain decade or like a whatever, like to be charming, kind of like some of those old
Hmm,
like 80s stuff. Like some people do
for
find like
sure.
practical effects very, even though they're kind of silly. So I could see it's some of it's just a preference in
I
some
don't think
ways.
the aughts have quite come around to that.
No, not yet.
I think a lot of those movies are kind of grating.
Yeah. Well, they were still finding their way around CGI, trying to figure out how much
CGI was so
CGI they
bad.
could put
Yeah.
into something. And like some of them went overboard. I think it was hard to do it really well and just kind of slip a little bit in. They just kind of all went crazy with it, it sounded like.
So up and coming, I am seeing Long Legs next week. I couldn't be more
Ah,
excited.
yes.
I
Woo. Yeah,
hope
there's a lot of buzz about that movie. I feel like every like advertisement I get is long legs now.
I know I'm seeing a lot of those too, but I figure I brought it on myself. I've talked about it so much. All my devices are like, we know what she's gonna buy.
Uh-huh.
I hope I'm not building it up too much for myself, but
Yeah.
I have a good feeling about it. I'm also seeing A Quiet Place Day One in a few days.
Oh,
It's
cool.
not my favorite franchise.
I've heard good things about it.
Looks very action movie like, in at least in
Yeah.
the first act from like the trailer, but
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll at least be fun.
Well, what's
So,
interesting, what I heard about it is that I guess I only saw the first one. I have not seen the second one yet, but I guess the first two movies, they're very self-contained because they didn't have as big a budget. So they knew that in order to tell the original story, which is going to require a huge budget, they had to make the first two first and then go back and do the prequel. So a lot of that was driven by just they didn't have the money to do what they wanted to. So jumped ahead, basically.
I think that's part of what doesn't appeal to me. Like I kind of
Is that
liked
right?
the lower budget,
Yeah.
like self-contained
I mean, they didn't look
stories.
cheap. The first movie especially didn't look cheap for sure. I would not have thought
No,
that,
that's true.
but yeah, it's very self-contained. I would say, it takes place mostly on the farm or wherever. But yeah, that I've seen some previews. It does look more action movie like, but
Well, what have you been watching lately?
oh, well, so I did go back and in honor of tonight's movie, I went back and watched the original Ouija from 2014, which I made the mistake of looking up beforehand and finding out just how much everyone loved this movie.
So much they loved it,
So much love for it.
including
And
myself.
oh man, I gotta say, it's very paint by numbers, very it's almost kind of like AI generated. It's almost like they just got a whole bunch of
It's too
ideas
long
that like
ago,
they
though.
thought teenagers liked and just kind of put them in a pot and just out came a movie. I don't know. I mean, it's very silly, but I can at least appreciate a silly movie like that. That's all I have to say about that movie. I'll have more to say when we talk about tonight's movie. But I
Sure.
did get around to watching In a Violent Nature yesterday.
Oh,
Did you watch it yet?
no, but I please do
Oh,
report.
it this is one where the only reviews that I read all centered around them being like a guy walks around a forest for like an hour and 20 minutes. And yes, he does. I'm not
I'm
gonna
like, I also read that and I was like, I think this is going to appeal to me.
uh-huh. It's a vibe. Let me just put it that way. There is not much story. It's an aesthetically driven film. It's a very like I guess kind of experimental in a way. It takes the very formulaic slasher film and just tries something a little different with it. And it's very tedious. I could totally see why people would say that. But where it pays off, it really pays off. And it left me with like a very weird feeling, I guess, which is to me, that's like the
Oh,
marker of a movie that's like, okay,
right.
that did something for me. I don't know if I'll go back and watch it again, but I am happy that I did watch it. Let's just put it that
That's
way. It's
that's
a
good
very
enough.
bare bones movie. It relies on very little to carry a movie, but the kills are fantastic in it. I'm not you're not as much into the slashers, I know, but the main character, the main I guess villain or whatever you want to call him, is just like this hulking guy. He's got such a presence, and I think what works so well about the movie is they just throw you into it and you don't know anything about this guy. And I think that's what they do so well with it is you're just constantly asking yourself questions like, why is he doing what he's doing? What is driving him? And you don't really get a lot of answers until like way into the movie. So
Hmm.
that's what kept my attention. The cinematography is kind of cool, and it's just a different take on slasher films, which I can always appreciate because they get very stale very quickly in a lot of ways. So
Right. But,
yeah,
plenty of people are happy with the formula and they don't want to see anything different. So I can understand that
exactly. And
too.
that's where you get the people, and then the people with no attention spans who are like, he's just walking all the time. It's like, yeah, but you got to just put your phone down. Just watch the film. You don't need to be checking the time. Just watch it. It's not a long movie. It's like less than an hour and a half, I want to say. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm glad I gave it a shot because it's definitely different. Again, don't know if I'll watch it anytime soon, but definitely recommend.
I hereby commit that I'm giving it a shot.
Do it. Do it. It's
I
yeah.
kind of scared myself just by saying that. I got goosebumps. Like,
Eh,
whoa, do I really want to see it? It looks so
I think you
scary.
do. There's a lot of just really long shots, which I always kind of appreciate because when you have long shots, you're always looking in different corners of the screen. And especially because it takes place mainly in like a forest, you're constantly looking like, did something move? You almost feel like you're
Dude,
a character in the movie.
I have so much anxiety that those long shots, I'm like creating my own horror the whole
Yes.
time, and it just escalates.
I mean, that was like the whole paranormal activity franchise, right? You're just
Right?
looking in the corners of your screen for something to happen. But,
All the
when
relaxed
it
people
works, it
were like,
works.
what's the big deal about this?
Yeah. Right. There's just a pool filter that goes around for like an hour and a half. But yeah, I
Exactly.
enjoyed it. And then have you seen the Heretic trailer with
I
Hugh
haven't
Grant?
yet, but I've heard of it and I saw a picture of him as the villain, and
Uh-huh.
like, I kind of accidentally almost read too much about it, but yeah, I want to see the trailer. I'm guessing
Oh
it'll
my God.
probably play like when I
Yeah.
go see The Quiet Place day one.
It's a very effective trailer. I think it's an A24 film. And why has Hugh Grant never been in a horror movie before? Because my
Wasn't that a great
gosh,
choice?
he looks so, oh my gosh, he just looks so villainous in this movie and he plays it so well, just like that, oh, I'm just a British guy. Like, oh gosh, for now, what's gonna happen?
We'll never look at British guys the same way again.
No. And the
It'll be
best part is
ruined.
that is my wife's like biggest celebrity crush. So I'm like, oh,
Oh no.
your
Are you
boy,
gonna
your
make her
boy's
are
in
you
a
gonna make
horror
her watch
movie.
it?
I think I might have to. May have to suss that one out first, but yeah, I'm super excited about that though. But yeah, I think that's about it. There's just so many good movies to watch. I just don't even have the time for all of them,
I
unfortunately.
know
But
this podcast could be 5 hours long if we
yeah,
weren't careful.
I think so. But that brings us to tonight's movie. Do you want to
Tonight's movie.
reveal our categories in the movie?
I do. All right. Tonight on this America's birthday, we are pleased to bring you part two of Priests and Prequels, a cursed category which is probably self-explanatory, but we're talking about movies that are both prequels and have at least one priest as a character. In part one, we reviewed The First Omen, a movie that I think it's safe to say we both highly recommended. So if you haven't yet, please give that episode a spin. Tonight, we bring you our thoughts on Ouija, which I know Bill says Ouija, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah, I
say
think I said
Ouija?
Ouija.
I say Ouija. How fun. Okay. Our Ouija Origin of Evil 2016. This movie is a prequel to the stupidly titled Ouija 2014, not to be confused or to be confused with several other movies of the same title.
Hmm.
Ouija Origin of Evil, though, was directed by Mike Flanagan, who had nothing to do with the original movie, and it was written by Flanagan along with Jeff Howard and Juliet Snowden. Flanagan, of course, is super famous for his many, many TV and movie horror credits. Among my favorite ones are he's written and directed Midnight Mass and The Haunting of Hill House, as well as the 2013 feature film Oculus, which is much criticized, but I love it. He has also been tapped for the next Exorcist movie. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. Oh,
Yes,
that's so
after the
cool.
2023 Believer debacle got David Gordon Green, I think correctly booted out of the
Yeah.
franchise.
Is Flanagan just becoming the savior for all these like terrible ones where like the producers like we need to get a better movie made in this franchise? Because that's kind of what happened with this one, it sounds like.
Maybe. But that one is due out in 2026, so fingers crossed that that train can get back on the tracks because it could be a killer franchise.
Well, I appreciate they're taking their time and giving it a couple of years. Maybe that'll make it a little better.
Yes, I finally learned to have patience for these things. I used to feel like, what, that movie's coming out in 2 years? It might as well be an eternity.
Right.
I remember feeling that way. Um, anyway, about the co-writers, Jeff Howard got his screenwriting start co-writing with Flanagan on Oculus, which I loved. He was also a writer on The Haunting of Hill House, as well as the feature Resident Evil 2022. And he executive produced Midnight Mass. So see, horror is just one big happy family.
Mm-hmm.
Juliet Snowden, her writing credits include Boogeyman 2005, The Possession 2012, and the less than stellar Ouija 2014. But to her credit, how I understand it is her original script for Ouija was actually much better than what was ultimately produced. So who knows what happened there? A committee of some sort is what happened, I imagine.
Uh-huh.
But Ouija Origin of Evil stars a young Annalise Basso as 15-year-old Lena. She has a very distinguished looking face. I think she's very interesting looking.
Yes, I
It's a
agree.
good choice for horror. You might recognize her from Oculus. Have I mentioned that movie? As well as a bunch of Lifetime originals and I think like some Christian movies. Also starring as the broke fake medium widowed mother Alice is seasoned actor Elizabeth Reeser, who is an interesting person. She has appeared in the Twilight movies. She was in Dark Harvest last year. She's been in so many other films, as well as a bunch of series, including The Handmaid's Tale.
Mm-hmm.
She also played Shirley in The Haunting of Hill House. But all of that is just a small slice of her work. She's a very hardworking actor. She was a Juilliard grad in the 90s. She's done theater. She's appeared in a feature film almost every year up through the present. in her adulthood. Fun facts, she went to Catholic school, so see, she's been preparing for this role her entire life. Also, my favorite fun fact, her stepfather, who has now passed, was a literal billionaire. So she probably didn't have to do any of that. She didn't have to work a day in her life. Yet she's been consistently a hard worker her entire adult life. You love to see it,
Yeah.
especially in the arts. Back to Ouija Origin of Evil, starring as the younger sister Doris, is the fabulous young Lulu Wilson. Fun fact, Lulu Wilson also plays Shirley in the Haunting of Hill House series. She plays the child version of Shirley. Wilson also has a pretty amazing resume. Her film debut was the 2014 horror Deliver Us from Evil, and she would go on to star in 2017's Annabelle creation from the Conjuring universe before her roles in The Haunting of Hill House and The Fall of the House of Usher. I would also like to mention that she plays a young character named Kestra Troy Riker in one episode of Star Trek Picard Season 1.
There it is.
Because, as you know, I love it when horror intersects with Star Trek. Also, brief cameo with Lynn Shay as the older adult Lena. Any notes that you'd like to add before I do a little quick plot synopsis?
The only one I have is Katie Siegel's also in this, which is Mike Flanagan's wife, who's also in a lot of his projects.
Was she the lady with the like 1950s looking haircut in the first
Yes, at the
scene?
beginning. Yeah, she has like this blonde hair, which is why I didn't recognize her till the second time I watched it.
I thought she looked familiar, to be honest.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, the hairstyle was throwing me.
Yeah, she's in like a lot of Mike Flanagan's movies, and she's really good. I like her in a lot of those as well.
That's sweet they work together.
I know. It's almost like Rob Zombie and Sherry Moon Zombie, except Kate Siegel can actually act, which is good. So. Anyway.
Yeah, so here's a quick plot synopsis. I promise not to spoil anything until after you hear the music. No spoilers now.
Nope.
The original movie, stupidly titled Ouija, takes place in the 20-teens. This 2016 prequel is set in the groovy 1960s, though, so there's a totally different vibe. We follow a widowed mother and her two daughters who run a seance business, which is kind of cute. It's entirely a scam. It's all them, making things happen, making the candles blow out and things. But things take a dark turn when they add a new prop, a Ouija board, to spice up their act. As you might predict, with their spirit board activities, they unwittingly open a portal to the other side, and the youngest daughter gets possessed by a malevolent spirit. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Come on, people. The family must battle an evil that threatens to tear them apart, and at the same time, they must very carefully engineer events to seg into the storyline of the original Ouija movie. Will they succeed at either? You will have to listen to the rest of this podcast to find out. Or you could just watch the movie, but we hope that you do both. Had you seen this movie before, Bill?
I had not. So I get to do my 3 things I thought I'd see in the movie.
Oh, goody.
And I think I did pretty well, actually. So again, based on only the IMDb description of this movie, my number 1 was a candle gets blown out by a non-physical entity. So ding, ding, ding. Number 2, someone gets trapped in a room. That one, I don't think I got that one. I think I might. There is a room,
somebody fakes being trapped in a room. I think that might count.
Yeah, maybe. All right, half point. Number 3, the characters consult an old book. They consult some old documents. I don't know if it's not really a book. So maybe another half a point.
At one point, Father Tom quotes something from the Bible.
Oh, he does. Okay, done. Point.
Although the book did not appear in the movie, I think it still counts. Yeah.
We know the book. So yeah, those are my 3 things. Stacey, had you seen the movie?
I had not seen it. I wasn't sure if I had seen it until I played
I thought
it.
You had actually. Okay.
I wasn't sure whether I'd seen the first one either, thanks to the completely uninspired title. It's no surprise there are a handful of other movies with the same title that I may or may have not seen. So I decided to watch the original first, since Origin of Evil is the prequel of the duology. I immediately realized in the opening scene of that one that I had seen it before, and it's kind of a dumb movie.
Yeah.
It can be a fun time. So I offer that fact as a disclosure along with the three things that I expected to see in Ouija Origin of Evil, which it turns out I had not before seen. First thing is a spirit appears in a mirror. This one is boring and almost kind of a gimme, I thought, so I made the other two really specific to
Okay.
make up for it.
Sure.
Okay. Second one is the Ouija board planchette flies across the room by the hand of a spirit. I don't think that happened.
No, it didn't, but I could see why you'd put that.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe in the third one.
And then the next one, I thought I was being really clever because I had seen the first one. I knew about the mouths being tied shut thing.
Yes.
So I was like, someone has a sewing related accident, which could have been perfect foreshadowing, but that didn't happen.
Oh,
Yeah, so kind of struck out today. I got 1 out of 3.
that's okay. You win some, you lose some. Any content warnings? I mean, this is a PG-13 horror movie, so I would say this is probably a little bit on the lighter side, but do you have any additional, in addition to our regular standard content warnings?
Sure do. First, I'd like to say that finally, the fact that we have a standard content warning is not a lie. I finally taken care of that. That was a late to do item. So we do have a
Woo.
standard content warning that I think, embraces most of the situations, but it's also very general. So I'm always going to try to give specific things when they apply. So I would say in this one, gore is fairly minimal. If that bothers you, it's not really going to be a problem. I don't remember seeing, I guess the very end, maybe
Yeah, a little
some
bit.
blood, little
Yeah.
blood, but just blood.
Good.
One character is shackled in a basement. A character gets strangled. There's a little bit of body horror. There's a hanging. A child dies. That's all I can personally think of. But I also think that you should not consider this list exhaustive. I'm learning more and more about how triggers can be all sorts of things. So if you know you have any particular ones, I recommend the site doesthedogdie.com, which I use to find out if the dog dies, literally, but it surveys viewers on a long list of triggers, not just animal death. And if you are wondering, the answer is no, thankfully, no dogs die in Ouija Origin of Evil.
Yay.
Now over to you, Bill, for our dark fact of the day, and I really hope it doesn't involve dogs dying.
Dark fact.
Today's dark fact does not involve any animals, but it does deal with gastromancy, which is the act of fortune telling based on sounds and signs of the belly. Gastro meaning like stomach, and then mancy meaning to the divination of talking to spirits, basically. And the sounds of digestion were thought to be the voices of the dead and were interpreted by the seer in a kind of possession experience. So some scholars believe that the seer who translated or sneakily created these noises were the forerunners of the modern ventriloquists. So they would listen to people's stomachs and actually do fortunes based on that. Later, gastromancy came to mean divination with round, belly-shaped objects like water goblets or crystal balls, which are still popularly used today. So basically, they started out by doing stomachs, and then that transferred to things like crystal balls. There's all sorts of weird crap like this that I was reading about.
People are so weird. How do they
like
come
using
up with this stuff?
bones to like try to do fortune telling, and like even feces, human feces apparently they can use to do fortune telling. So
all because they didn't have TV. That's my theory.
yes, exactly. Yes, all of that. And another one, which is very interesting, this has nothing to do with that, but in terms of the Ouija board, apparently Sylvia Plath actually wrote a poem using the Ouija board. So it does have some historical significance, and the poem was called Dialogue Over a Ouija Board. Very strange.
Okay, I don't know about that one, so I'm going to have to look it up.
Yeah, check it out. But yeah, the Ouija board's got kind of an interesting history. Nothing too dark about it. It's just a whole lot of charlatans and, sales, people that just want to make money off of the general
It's a
public.
Hasbro product. How bad could it be?
Exactly. But anyway, that's our dark fact of the day. So we're going to take a brief intermission and we'll be right back with our spoilerific plot discussion. So stick around. All right, and we are back and ready for our spoilerific plot discussion of Ouija Origin of Evil. So the film starts out with the original Universal logo, which is really cool to see. And I know I was reading up, Mike Flanagan did a lot of little things like this to try to place this back in the 60s and 70s, that aesthetic. So I
He's probably
appreciated
an
that.
okay guy, isn't he? I mean,
He's a good dude, you know. He's all right in my book. And then the film opens in Los Angeles, 1967, and we get a really cool title card, which I think I would
oh,
describe as kind of like a almost like a game card. You would
I
see
think
like a
it looked kind of like the classic like Ouija kind of layout, missing some of
yeah,
the letters and stuff, but like the corners to me look like the same style of art at least.
yeah, the kind of curly, yeah. It was really
Hmm.
cool. I like that. Again, right out of the gate, I love a good title card. I think I've talked about that in like every episode. So already it's checking the boxes for me. So we have a fortune teller named Alice who is meeting with a man and his daughter, who's played by the great Kate Siegel, wife of the director Mike Flanagan. And she's clearly very skeptical, and they all join hands and they're trying to talk to the man's wife or his deceased wife, Mary Browning. And as they're doing this, a cabinet behind her opens, the candle gets blown out. She lights the candle in the middle of the table, uses this as a way to communicate with Mary. The daughter is still very skeptical, and then a figure shows up outside of like the door curtain, which is kind of a little bit creepy. And it busts through, the lights go out, and the guy passes out. And I'm like, oh boy, we got ourselves a heart attack.
I thought the same thing. I was like, uh-oh, does they need liability insurance back then? Probably not. You just pay a
Do
doctor
fortune
like
tellers get
$50.
insurance? I can't even imagine how that goes.
Not back then.
No, probably not. So then, luckily, he's walking out of their house, so he did not die. So, yay for that. And she doesn't accept his money, which I thought was very interesting because the first impression you get of Alice is that she's a huckster. She's out, she's in it for the money. So I was like, okay, already that's a very interesting character point there.
Have you heard of the like school of screenwriting called Save the Cat?
No, I don't think
So
so.
it's this like really popular but sort of I mean, people argue against it all the time, but like the name of it comes from the idea that in the very first or scene or very close to the first scene, your flawed character who needs to be flawed enough to have a transformation
Hmm.
also needs to have like one immediately redeeming thing about them that will make them, likable and relatable to the audience. So
Okay,
like in my mind, I was like, she just saved a cat.
interesting.
That was it.
And that's so that like you actually care about this person and want them to do good. And
Right. Because
okay.
otherwise, why watch the movie? For most people, if you
I
don't
will say
like,
a lot of movies fail in that regard, and those movies
Mhm,
lose me immediately because I'm like, I don't care about this person. Like, give me something, and that's
exactly.
that's the theory. Interesting. I can put a name to it now. Oh,
Yeah. So like that immediately gives you like some depth to her character.
yeah.
Like yes, she is kind of a crook,
Mm-hmm.
but same time, she's not going to take the old guy's money.
Yeah. Yay for her.
I also want to say that this is the point in the movie where I started to notice the incidental music. Does it remind you of anything?
I don't know if it's this music. Later in the movie, I have a note about music that reminds me of a certain song, but I don't think it's what you're
Hmm,
talking about.
probably not. The incidental music, now you're going to have to go back and listen,
I will.
but it's like in all of these scenes where like nothing bad is happening, it's just the regular stuff of the movie
Uh-huh.
happening. It's so much like the incidental music in The Haunting of Hill House.
Really?
So that there's like a piano motif and it kind of uses like the right half of the piano. It never goes too low into the bass notes, but like
Okay.
it has functionally one bass note and then it has a chord. And it's usually like a minor one chord. And like, if it's a minor scale, call it a
Right.
minor one, maybe fudging my theory a little here. Then it's like bass one, bass major four chord. And then sometimes as it progresses, there's like a major six and a minor five too.
Interesting.
This was a couple few years before Hill House, and I wonder if Flanagan was like, "Hey, let's just lift the music from this other movie I did," or like, is this Flanagan's theme, like that he could just lay down anytime he wants?
So I just looked it up. They use the same composer. They're called the Newton Brothers, and they did this movie and The Haunting of Hill House. So
I'm telling you, it's not just the same composers; it's like the same music. It's so similar.
They've done all of his stuff. They did, Fall of the House of Usher, Midnight Mass. Yeah, so they've done all of his stuff, his big stuff. So yeah, wouldn't be surprising. I didn't catch that though. Good ear. Yeah, you've got that music ear. So the man walks out, he turns down his money. Then we go back inside, we go to the reading room. And this part I thought was really cool. I like scenes like this where they expose all of the different tricks that they use. And like Doris, the younger daughter, pops out of the cabinet and Lena's part of it. And they're like, moving the table around. And you can see all the gears and nuts and bolts of all the stuff that they're using to like rig these readings, which I love that.
Me too.
And then they kind of get into a real brief discussion about like the ethics of what they're doing. And Alice is trying to explain to the girls, this isn't a scam because people, it gives people closure and peace and it heals their hearts. And the showmanship just helps them to believe it. So you start to get an idea of like where the girl, the daughters kind of feel about this and how Alice feels about it. And this is one of my favorite parts of this movie, like the dynamic between Alice and then the two daughters, Lena and Doris. It just constantly evolves throughout the movie, which is very interesting ways, I think, in regards to what they do is kind of like their family business now.
Yeah.
After that, we see a picture of Alice, the two girls, and a man. This turns out to be the dad who has recently been killed in a drunk driving accident. A drunk driver has killed him, which we find out in a little bit here. Cut to Doris. She's praying to her father. Her mother's like, shouldn't you be praying to God and all this? And she's like, yeah, my father, he never answers. And then Lena goes and sneaks out. And she sneaks out to this really cool house. It's like a real cool mid-century house, which I love.
I know, right?
Oh my God. And there is something about she shows up there. There's like maybe 3 other people, and they all look like young adults. And I think it's just because they were dressed in this like 70s aesthetic. But I couldn't tell how old they were. Like she's obviously in high school, but
yeah, the mom says later she's a sophomore, and the boy that
Mikey,
likes her, yeah, he's 17. So I think
yeah.
maybe this is like an older crowd.
But anyway, it's such a goofy looking scene just because I can't figure out how old anyone is. So yeah, they're at this house. Obviously, the mom is away, which we find out later she comes back. And one of them, the host is, finds the Ouija board's like, hey, we should do the Ouija board because that's what you do when you find a Ouija board, of course. And so they all go into a dark room and start, all 4 of them touch the planchette, which I learned that is what you call the piece that you use on the board.
Yeah.
It's called a planchette, which I did not know. And they start asking the spirit questions. And Mikey, the senior boy, asks Lena to homecoming. And I don't know if she even says yes. I think they just kind of like joke it away or something. And the one girl happens to be way more freaked out than the others. And then Lena starts, repeating, there's no spirit, there's no spirit. And then the mom bursts into the room yelling, which I thought was hilarious.
Oh my God.
This is the kind of humor that works for me because it's just this woman just comes in just raging mad at like her daughter that
I
she
love
had friends
that
over.
so much. And
Yes.
then it was also so realistic and relatable. And also, I just wanted to note that it's the rebellious 15-year-old daughter who snuck out,
Yep.
who's possibly drinking alcohol, who
Uh-huh.
played the Ouija first in this movie and probably brought the curse home on her family, even though there was other stuff going
Interesting.
on in that house.
Yeah.
But like, it's such a trope that it's a young teenage girl who's not doing what she's supposed to do,
Right.
who steps into something occult, and that's how the curse gets started. This is kind of a different twist on it because then later,
Yeah.
whatever happens later,
Stuff happens.
back to you.
So Alice, her mom, picks her up. She's obviously not happy. And then we get the standard, I know you've been acting up because of what happened to your dad conversation that we've heard in like a million movies. The whole, this is your form of grief, yada, yada, yada. And then the next morning, the boy, Mikey, the one that was at the seance, comes back to the house to, I guess, pick up Lena. And this is kind of interesting. In the background, I hear there's like a radio or a TV, and it's talking about, so I guess the moon landing had just happened, I think a couple of years prior to this. And they're talking about trying to find signs of life on the moon, which I thought was kind of an interesting parallel. So you have this house, their whole business is trying to find spirits in the other world. Meanwhile, the rest of society is trying to find life on another planet. So I thought that was an interesting parallel. You have this like small business doing that kind of work. And then how does that compare to what's going on in the greater world? So
Yes. I'm so glad you noticed that.
yeah, and it was very
That's
slight because
delightful.
and this is the thing with having subtitles on. I can catch all these like little radio things because they always throw those up on the subtitles. So kind of like
Love
cheating.
subtitles.
Yeah, me too. I'm just getting old. Mikey comes over and we get our first cigarette burn in the upper right hand corner of the screen, which was again another Mike Flanagan move to make this look really, really authentically 70s.
I saw that and I was like, no way. And I had to look it up.
My only knowledge of that comes from Fight Club. Anyone my age,
Mm.
I think their only knowledge of the
Yeah.
cigarette burn comes from Fight Club.
I think that's how
But
I learned it too.
yeah, it gets a little overused in this, but I thought it was a nice touch, at least the first couple times that I saw it. Alice pulls Mikey aside and does a palm reading on him and basically kind of, takes his hand, does a whole, shows him all the lines, and then gives him the listen, if you date my daughter speech, finds out that he's a senior, squeezes the palm of his hand as a warning, basically, like crushes his hand a little bit, which I appreciated. I like the whole like now single mother, being very protective of her daughters. So she's a
Yeah.
good mom.
Gotta look out for those kids.
Gotta watch out for them. Alice goes to the store to buy candles, and a Ouija box catches her eye. So she buys it as a new prop for work. So you think that because Lena saw this or played the Ouija board at this other house, you think that brought her mom to go purchase this the next day?
So possibly, but maybe not actually in the plot of the
Uh,
movie, but it was certainly at the very least a nod to that trope.
okay. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, it makes sense. There's some sort of connective tissue there. So next we cut to a scene, and now Doris, who is the young daughter. So Doris is the young one, Lena's the slightly older one. And Doris is at school, and some of the boys are, bullying her, saying like Doris is the Dorcas and calling her mom a witch. And then we are introduced to Father Tom, who steps in. So Father Tom is the actor that plays him. I forget what's his name, something Henry. He is the boy from E.T., the original E.T.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. At some point when
Yeah,
I knew we were doing this movie, I read that completely disappeared from my mind.
it's so weird when you know it, it like just makes total sense when you look at this guy's face because even though he's like what 30, 40 years older, like he still kind of looks like
Still
his character
Elliot.
in ET. Elliot, there you go. Yeah, good call.
Yeah.
And this actor, I gotta say, he did you see Gerald's Game?
I have avoided that one for reasons.
Yeah, and the reason is probably mostly his character. He plays kind of a small role, but it's a very icky role, and I have a
Hmm.
hard time watching him in anything after that. And that's of course another Mike Flanagan movie. But yeah, he plays Father Tom in this, so he plays a much more wholesome character, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And he kind of steps in and kind of, diffuses the situation. Meanwhile, Alice is walking up and thanks him, and you can kind of see some sparks here. She's kind of
Can
like,
you?
yeah,
Are we doing this again?
I'm the only one that picks up on these things.
Isn't this backwards? I'm supposed to see all the romance because
I
I'm the
guess
lady.
you just pick out all like the music intervals and stuff. I'm
Mm,
here picking out like the romance. I don't know. I watch a lot of like romantic comedies with my wife, so I'm like really in tune to these things.
mm.
But anyway, yeah. So Alice is kind of like, "Oh, thank you, Father," blah blah blah. And we learn that Father Tom had a wife before he became a priest, but she passed away. So Alice is a widow. Father Tom is a widow.
We learned this in the car on the way home, right? From the little girl from Doris, who is standing up in the back seat with no seat belts.
Oh
Like, it's
yeah.
so weird to see because we never see kids out of their car seats anymore. I was just like,
Now,
oh my God, this is not safe. Pull over, Alice.
my mom brought me home in a laundry basket, and I kid you
Oh my
not.
God.
And there's pictures of it. I've looked at him and like, Mom, what the hell is this? And she's like, Yeah, no, we brought you home from the hospital in that. I'm like, okay.
Used to be really hard to bring kids home from the hospital. They didn't always have nice, like, newborn.
No.
That's a pretty new invention.
But again, hey, I'm still here, so yay
It's
for
amazing.
that.
Did you drink out of the hose also?
Of course I did. I did all of the things that, yeah, we don't let kids do anymore, apparently. So Doris goes home. She sees the Ouija board on the table and is like immediately drawn to it. Alice is working on rigging the board by attaching magnets to her knees, which looked kind of silly to me. I don't know, it's kind of funny to manipulate the game. So you can just imagine her like moving her knees back and forth under the table, which she's really good at right away. I'm very impressed by her like dexterity and ability to like do that in a smooth way.
I wonder if she had a body double.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. I have some things to say about this actress, but I'll get there. While she's doing this, so she's downstairs in the reading room And while she's doing this, Doris is up in her room and she starts responding to her mom's questions that she's asking the Ouija board. Like, I think she asked something like, what is your name? And then Doris goes, Marcus. Very creepy. I think Lena looks over, doesn't really think all that much of it. She just thinks her sister's kind of being goofy, but that will come into play. Later that night, Alice goes back to the board and tries to speak to her deceased husband, Roger, but doesn't see anything, so she leaves the room. And when she does, the Blanchard says no to her question of whether he's there. Then Doris comes down right after that and takes a turn at it, and it just starts rapidly moving all over the place. Then she picks it up and looks through the glass, and shocked, she says, "Who are you?" And I don't believe we see anything. I don't think they give us a glimpse as to what she had seen through there, but she has seen something. So all we know at this point is that Doris has a certain affinity for this Ouija board, and it's starting to communicate with her in some way. Meanwhile, in her sister's room, the blanket is pulled off of her, and she thinks Doris did it, but there is no one there.
Why do the demons always want to play tug of war with the sheets?
This was kind of a silly scene, honestly. It doesn't really, I don't know. This movie didn't need it. It wasn't all that scary or anything, but
I mean,
anyway.
I enjoy it, but
Yeah.
I just ask myself.
Yeah. It's like, watch, go tickle her nose or something, It's just something that's seemingly silly. So the next day, Alice goes to meet with Father Tom as he has concerns about Doris. And we find out that her homework was written in cursive, which I'm guessing at her age she wouldn't be able to do. And so I think she starts asking, like, Lena, did you do her homework for her, or did someone else do her homework? And she says that her new friend helped her and that Doris let her use her hand. It's kind of creepy.
You know what's interesting? I think in 1967, you would totally learn cursive before the age of 9. It's like
Is that
nowadays
how old?
yeah, she's 9.
Yeah, okay.
They say it later.
Do they learn cursive now? I'm so far removed from
Not really.
now.
I think you get like 1 unit on it or something.
Okay.
It's not meant to be permanent.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of times I use cursive in a year is very, aside from
I don't remember
signing
how
my
to write
name.
in cursive, to be honest. Like if I ever have to write anything by hand, like I get hand cramps.
Yeah, seriously. Try doing like a uppercase Z sometimes, or I think some of the hard ones. There's some ridiculous ones, or a Q.
Oh, I quit doing the uppercase Q like when I was a kid. I was like, I'm not doing that. I just wrote a print Q along
Yeah,
with
that's
the
probably for the
yeah.
best. It looks ridiculous. So yeah, she's saying that her new friend helped her with it, and they return home to find a foreclosure notice on the door. So things go from bad to worse. Doris says Dad won't like this. I should tell him. And she goes ahead and obviously pulls out the Ouija board. She's getting super attached to this thing. Meanwhile, Lena and Alice have a chat on the porch. And I thought this was kind of a cool shot. So the initial shot is like staring straight at their house. So they're on the porch. The door is open behind them. And you see, they're just talking about like, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And Doris grabs the Ouija board. And then you see her go down the stairs in the back, which goes down to the basement. So I thought this was a very clever way to kind of show all of this stuff in kind of one scene. And this is where we learn that the husband, Roger, was killed by a drunk driver. And Alice is in despair that they're going to lose the house. And then Doris comes to the rescue. She comes outside with a pouch full of money. And she shows them that she tells them that she found it in the wall behind the furnace in the basement and that her daddy told her where it was.
Can I just go adopt a child that can find money like that?
Right?
I mean, seems like a good strategy.
It's like the best golden retriever you could find. Like, go find the money. Go find the money.
It's like the goose that lays the golden egg. Like,
yeah, yeah.
Good. Find another one tomorrow. Good work.
Yeah. How does this work? Do they regenerate every, few hours? Because that'd be great, like in a video game.
Yeah. Good question.
So at this point, yeah, because of this weird thing, now all three of them sit down for a session. And Lena gets freaked out when the board says that Roger is there. She seems very just kind of freaked out. She's not on board with this Ouija board basically this whole time. She's like the outsider of the three of them, just not into it at all. So now Alice is kind of like testing the board. She's asking Roger through Doris where Roger was when she told him that she was pregnant with Lena. And he correctly responds, the shower, which apparently was true. So now we're starting to get some validity here. Doris is actually somehow able to, channel this spirit of their her deceased husband. She can apparently see them through the lens, but hasn't seen her daddy yet. Next, Alice is super excited that they can finally do what they've been pretending to do, but Lena is still understandably freaked out. So this is a really interesting point in the movie, because at this point, Doris and Alice are kind of on the same team. Like they're like kind of pumped about this. They're buying into it. They're like, this is going to expand our business. We can help so many people. Whereas Lena's like, I want nothing to do with this. So you're already starting to see some like kind of cracks form between the three of them, which I think is kind of a fun part of this movie, the dynamic between the three of them.
Yeah.
And then we learn that Alice's mom was a fortune teller before Alice was born, like a legitimate one from what I gather. And she seems to think that it basically skips a generation. So she's basically calling herself a fraud. Alice is calling herself a fraud. Her mom was a legit fortune teller, and now she sees it in Doris, saying that it skips a generation, which again, I thought was kind of interesting. Lena looks through the lens and sees a dark figure quickly move out of frame. This is the first time we get to see this dark figure.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah, it's super quick. I don't think you really see anything except basically just darkness at this point.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, I appreciate they didn't reveal it too quick here. The next day, Lena is talking to Mikey, goes for a kiss, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. Father Tom brings Lena into his office to talk about Doris, because apparently Doris hasn't been at school for the past 4 days. And Lena says that she has been with her mom and they've been working. So Doris has just been doing readings for the last 4 days.
Child labor, no good.
Yeah, how does that work with fortune telling? Are there laws, strict child labor laws that apply to fortune telling?
I mean, I think just the regular ones.
Yeah. Okay. Is it regulated?
Yeah.
Who's checking in on these fortune tellers?
It's a big topic. Maybe another podcast.
Yeah, fair enough. Our spinoff. So they're using the Ouija board with customers, and Doris is the main medium, and people's voices are now starting to come out of her mouth. So this is a whole nother level here, which I thought was kind of a cool thing. We see this a few times. And it's usually only like one word, if I'm not mistaken. It's not like whole sentences, but she'll start saying something and then all of a sudden like a man's voice will come out of her mouth for like one word. So super cool.
It's kind of a fun time in this movie, like before things get too intense and scary.
Yeah,
like,
it's still fun.
yeah.
The stakes
are
low.
The Hasbro phase of the movie.
Yeah. Yep, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, we're still in the Hasbro phase. We'll find out when that switches. That night, Doris wakes up with a gasp, complaining that her neck hurts. And so what does she do? She immediately goes down to the board to ask what happened to her neck, of course. And I think she's kind of asking her father.
I love this moment. It's about 40 minutes in, and she goes,
"As friends we've gathered, blah, blah, blah. What happened to my neck?"
Doris, that is pretty much how I felt every time they said those lines in the original Ouija movie.
Yes. And that's totally what like someone her age would do. Like, all right, let's just get to this already. Like, I don't have the patience for this.
Turns out to be a great scene, though. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Okay, sorry.
No.
So then she, of course, looks through the planchette and she sees something move fast. She looks again. Same thing. Something moves really fast out of the frame. Then she walks away from the table and then looks again and sees a large black figure in front of her that says, "This was a game."
Ding! I get something off my list.
The mirror? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one. What did you think of the visual representation of this creature? We'll just say. What'd you think?
At least how I was watching it, it was like dark enough that I really didn't have to form an opinion. Like I could see its like eyes a little brighter, and then everything else was really dark. I don't want to spoil anything that you're going to say, but I do think that the unhinged jaw, screaming face gets me every time. Like,
yes.
Also, why doesn't anyone wake up? Because she screams a little.
That's a good point. Must be
on
heavy
sleeping.
sleepers. Yeah.
Love me a demon child.
I feel like this creature, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that felt like American Horror Story.
Mhm.
Like this creature definitely had like that kind of vibe to it. It almost looks like a dark black oil creature. I don't know, with like really glowy eyes.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But yeah, there's a few things of the aesthetic of this film, for the good and the bad. It's not all good, unfortunately. But yes, as you said, the figure says this was a game, and then her mouth is forced open, and the figure shoves his arm down her throat, and her body is thrown backwards, and she is left convulsing on the ground. This was an effective scene. I think this is where it gets real. This gets out of the Hasbro territory.
I think this was the 50% mark. I just like to observe that because that's usually when the flip happens,
Oh, you think this is like probably, exactly 50% of the way through?
Pretty
I
much.
can see that.
Yeah.
So at the same time, we cut to Lena, who's in bed, and she dreams that Doris is whispering creepily in her ear, which, yes, very creepy. But then she wakes up frightened, goes into the bathroom, and then she has another dream in which her mouth is sewn shut. So it's a dream within a dream.
I hate the dream within a dream trope.
I do too.
Just let's retire that, can we?
I agree. It's been overdone. And at this point, have we seen the doll yet? Lena's doll that she got from her father?
Maybe, but I am certain that I did not like pay attention until it got to be important.
Because there is a scene where it's very like ham-fistedly shoved into the movie where they show her nightstand and you see the bear, and then you see a photo with her dad, and the bear in the photo. So it's like you are just serving this up on a platter. So clearly, yep, this bear means something because there's a photo. Like it's a little ham-fisted, but anyway. So that's the whole night. Yep, she has a dream within a dream, and now we're on to the next day at school. The same boys go to shoot Doris with a slingshot, but she does her creepy thing where she kind of stares and turns around, and then this causes the slingshot to turn around, and he shoots himself in the face, which I appreciate.
Love that
I like
for
this
her.
scene.
Yes.
This movie would have benefited from way more scenes with like other kids. I feel like that is one of my gripes about this movie. Every scene where Doris is with like her fellow kids, or even with like Mikey, who's, still like a high school student, those are my favorite scenes. I think she spends way too much time with like adults in this movie, and it's just not quite as fun. But
I personally was that kid on the playground, so like I wanted to see everybody that's ever bullied her get something done to them, but that would be a completely different movie. It wouldn't really.
I thought you were the one with the slingshot. I was like,
oh
geez.
No.
You would not strike me that way, knowing you now.
I would not have been allowed to have a slingshot, probably.
Actually, it's funny. I had a wrist rocket, which is like a hyper version of that, and I should not have had that either. I got it as like
dangerous.
They're terrible. And yeah, I was probably like 10. So talking about things that, when we were kids that probably shouldn't have had, that's up there. Okay, so that happened. And then Alice is going, I put Alice is going on a date with Father Tom. She's kind of perceiving this as a date. So she's getting all dolled up. And I think even Lena's like, wow, Mom, you look really good.
I'm so confused.
I know. She's really hoping that, she's going to woo this guy over. But I'm just going to call it a date. They're going on yeah, you really didn't get this?
No. It's a completely different movie you watched, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, this is my favorite part of it. No, I'm just kidding. It's not.
What?
But no, totally kidding. So Alice goes on a date with Father Tom. They go to like an Italian restaurant, and I think Alice's husband used to take her there or something, blah, blah, blah. So they're talking about that. But really, Father Tom just wants to discuss the girl, so wah, wah. Meanwhile, Lena has her boyfriend over, and they go upstairs to listen to records. And Doris is on the couch, and this was one of my favorite like shots in the movie. I don't know if you caught this, but the shot starts off with Doris. So the camera's looking at Doris. Doris is looking at like a TV kind of off screen, and her eyes are white. And then as soon as the door opens, you see her eyes flip and they go to normal. I didn't catch this until the second time I watched it.
Oh, it's so cool. I love that
It's
trick.
so cool. And this happens again later, which I really appreciate that they did this twice. So
can I back up for just a moment?
Yeah, by all means.
I want to observe that Lena was surprisingly mean.
Oh, yeah.
It just seemed kind of out of character. Like, I grew up alone. So I was like, is this just how siblings are? She's like, I'm going to melt your dolls if you tell Mom.
That's how siblings are in movies. I don't think that's actually how they are. To my experience, I've got an older brother and sister, and no, they were never like that. But
good to know. Good to know.
But anyway, Lena has her boyfriend. They go upstairs to listen to records, and the scene doesn't really matter. I guess they talk about how, well, one thing that they talk about is they're talking about being Romeo and Juliet, because that comes back in a second. But doesn't matter. Lena's like, oh, my mom's coming home soon. You got to leave. Okay, so he goes downstairs. Meanwhile, Alice is trying to convince Tom that the work that she does is good work, and she suggests that, she would be able to help him talk to his deceased wife, Gloria. And this is just kind of an interesting conversation because you have two people in vastly different, I'll just call them businesses, even though being a priest is not really a business, but they're both doing their best to help people in very different ways. So I thought this was a very interesting conversation where he basically, saying like you're doing this, through the occult. I'm doing it like the right way, basically, but really they have the same intention. So I kind of appreciate that. These two people coming together. And then he says something about in another life, basically we could have been together. Did you catch that?
No?
Yeah.
What?
Yes. I mean, I may have dreamt this. Maybe this is fan fiction, but
I was thinking the whole time, like, so he became a priest after his wife died.
Yeah.
He mentioned that he took his wife to the same restaurant. So he stayed in the same town as a priest. Like, that doesn't usually happen. Usually the bishop
no,
tells you where to go.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, might be getting into the nitty gritty of the priesthood here. I don't know how that works.
So many Catholic related horror movies over my lifetime. This is just what I
Even
think
just
about.
on this podcast, honestly, I think I'm already getting them confused.
It's the tip of
We were
the
just talking
iceberg.
about that. Oh my gosh, there's so many more.
Uh,
So that happens. None of this is really all that consequential. But then Lena's boyfriend, Mikey, goes downstairs and sees that the TV is on like the station sign off screen. And then Doris scares the hell out of him, like pulls up behind him and
love
says,
this.
Do you know what it feels like to be strangled to death? First, you feel the pressure in your throat. Your eyes water. And you start to taste something very, very sour in your mouth. Then, it's like someone lights a match right in the middle of your chest. And that fire grows. It fills your lungs and your throat, and all the way behind your eyes. And finally, that fire turns to ice. Like pins and needles of ice are sticking into your fingers, your toes, your arms. You see stars, then darkness. And the last thing you feel is cold. Good night, Romeo.
I thought this was like the best part of this actress's performance, Doris's,
Me too.
Lulu, whatever her name is. Truly effective and really creepy delivery. I'm not the biggest fan of some of these characters, but this scene really worked. And like I said, anytime she's conversing with like another kid or like, high schooler, it works really well. And then she ends this by saying, "Good night, Romeo," which was really great because this is what they were talking about upstairs. She would not have been able to hear this. And it's just that little touch. Good night, Romeo.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about that, but it matters later.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And basically, Mikey's just like, okay, I'm getting the hell out of here at this point.
Good choice. Don't come back.
Yeah, seriously, I'm amazed that he wants anything to do with Lena after this. But then she goes back and sits down to stare at the station sign-off screen again, which is again super creepy, like very like poltergeisty, like what is going on in this little
She
girl's
does
head?
the mouth thing again, right?
Oh yeah, I think she does. She does that like 80 times in this movie, which it's a little
Gets me.
overused, but
Gets me.
yeah,
I feel like I'm gonna dream about it.
it'll be a pleasant dream, I'm sure. Later, Lena sees that the doll that her father had given her has had her mouth sewn shut and gets understandably really pissed off. Her dad gave her that doll. So she confronts Doris, who says that daddy did it and it was not her. Alice comes up, same thing. What did you do, Doris? Blah, blah, blah. And again, we could get the interesting dynamic where Lena accuses Doris and Alice of living in a fantasy world and she wants no part of it. So again, Alice and Doris are just kind of like a team and Lena wants nothing to do with it. And I appreciate it. Lena just kind of cuts through the bullshit,
I love that it's the rebellious teenager that is being
Yeah.
the sensible person in this movie.
Yeah, the
It's kind
level-headed
of a
one here.
reversal. Yeah.
I agree. The next day, Doris doesn't want to go to school. She'd rather stay here, talk to her friends, again, which is basically just using the Ouija board. And then Lena notices a pile of paper under Doris's bed and brings them to Father Tom because she's very concerned because they appear to be written in Polish. So she gives them to Father Tom. He's like, we have a sister Hannah who I think came over from Poland. Let me see if she can translate these. And then the very next scene, he comes to the house, which I thought was really weird, this sequence here. Like, you would usually have a few scenes before he comes back with the papers. But no, the very
It
next
seems like
scene,
very quick. Like,
very
is
quick.
Hannah typing this? She must be very
Yeah.
fast because
Very
translating is
strange. Like,
slow.
and this is just like later that it's still like light out. So like this is a couple hours later. He comes to their house with the papers. It's a whole rigmarole. He's basically trying to get Alice and Lena alone away from Doris so that he can discuss this. But he actually sits down to do a reading with them. And I thought this scene was very interesting. So Tom's like, yes, I would love to talk to my deceased wife. And they ask like, what is her middle name? And Doris says Lynn. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's right, and all this. And then there's a couple more of those. I forget what else he asks.
Supposedly, she says she forgives him, and he's like, "What do you forgive me for?"
Right.
And she says a fight, and then he's like, "What was the fight about?" And then it just went to no. And then she says, "That's not important."
And there was something about don't hide behind the collar, want you to be happy. Oh, and the
Yeah.
word happy is then done in this, Gloria's voice, this other like older woman's voice.
Yeah.
So as a viewer, we're like, oh my God, she nailed it again. She's clearly communicating with his deceased wife. But then he says, I want to talk to Lena and Alice alone. Doris, stay down here. So then Tom reveals that his wife's middle name is actually Catherine, but his mother's middle name was Lynn. So it turns out he was thinking Lynn to try to test if Doris was able to read his mind, and clearly she was able to. So I thought that was kind of clever. This could have been, a really boring scene, but yeah, that was really clever. So that he basically says that Doris is not a fraud, but is able to channel forces that he doesn't understand. So now we're getting down to the nuts and bolts of it. So now we quick cut to Doris, whose mouth is open, and then the same shot of her watching TV, and then you see behind her that Mikey comes, and gosh, Mikey, stay the hell away.
Mikey's here to play.
Mikey's always here. He asks if Lena's home. Doris is like, no, they're upstairs, blah, blah, blah.
Don't
she's
go
being real
away.
creepy. Yeah, don't go away. She tells him about the treasure in the walls and is like super insistent that he goes to look at it. And of course, he goes with her, reaches in the wall, finds some old IDs, and then Doris's face starts contorting in the background. This one was really effective.
Oh, I love that
this
moment. That was so scary.
So she's got him all by himself now, and then he finds the bones in the wall, and Doris grabs his face and both of his eyes roll in the back of his head. So
is that what's
Mikey's
happening in your
trouble.
background there behind you? Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, there it is.
Super
creepy.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Father Tom is explaining that what Doris wrote in the journal was actually from a man named Marcus from World War II. Talks about the devil's doctor. And it turns out the doctor brought Marcus to Alice's house where he conducted experiments on him and others, cut out their tongues, sealed their mouths, and Marcus was murdered. But the journal continued after that, which was a very creepy, strange line, I guess. We find out that moving will not fix things because Alice is like, oh, well, that's it. We'll just move. She's like, no, we're too far into this thing at this point. It's got Doris. Father Tom says Doris needs an exorcism from the Pope's exorcist. Yes, now we're getting to it.
So why are exorcisms so easy to get in this movie?
I don't know.
In other movies are like, it's going to take months. We need to see your head spinning around first.
Yeah, no, he seems to think he's got enough evidence to get this thing pushed through. Let's get this thing expedited.
That's good.
So they go downstairs and Lena's boyfriend swings down from like the chandelier. He's hung from the chandelier. And this was so goofy. They don't seem very broken up over this at all. This dude is just like hanging. And yeah, Lena's like, for like a second. She's don't really give a crap after
gotta
that.
Get Doris.
Yeah, Father Tom doesn't even like make any sort of face. I just thought this part was very funny. This is like one of those movie things where it's like, okay, whatever, let's move on. So then they hear old classical music coming from the basement. All three of them go down to investigate, and they also plan to burn the Ouija board in the furnace. Good idea.
Might as well while we're down there.
Yeah, why not? The light goes out as they put the board in the furnace. They see a skeleton in the hole in the wall, and Father Tom goes into the all too common adult man-sized vent to find another room with chains and other torture devices.
And a gramophone, right?
Yes. Yeah, the gramophone comes to a really slow stop.
Really cool looking gramophone.
Yeah, these are really, I wonder if you can still get these, like, and they still work or not. But
you can.
Doris comes out of the corner speaking as the deceased with white eyes, and she flies at him abruptly, just like you see in all these movies, which is like, whoosh, like right at him.
Yeah.
And he comes back out to Alice and Lena, and he is now clearly possessed. His eyes are white, and he's got this like weird stabbing implement. I'm not really sure what you'd
A
call it.
hook?
It's like,
Hook of
yeah, it's
some
kind of a
kind.
hook. It's like a hook knife. He looked very silly here. I gotta say, I don't know. There's something about,
Yeah.
he's not very scary looking, but he's just
There's
like
something from the original movie, like she told me the most wonderful,
most wonderful, yes,
awful things.
wonderful,
Yeah.
awful things. Yeah, he's in trouble. And then this part I thought was really cool. So they kind of run upstairs, and he's about to stab Alice, and his eyes return to normal for a second. And then he closes the door to actually keep her safe, which I thought was very interesting.
Hmm.
Now, did you understand this to be like his faith battling like the demonic presence in a way? Like he was able to flip back to normal in a way? Like he was kind of beating it for a second?
I didn't think of it that way, but I mean, it's no fun if like the demon just straight up wins without a fight. So it's
Yeah.
kind of one of those moments.
Yeah. Like maybe the demon's just not as strong in him at this point or something. I don't know. But anyway, really nice of him. He closes the door to keep her safe, but then he looks up on the ceiling, and sure enough, there's Doris, who screams, causing him to fall down the stairs. All these scenes where she's like on the ceiling and stuff, yeah, they just creep me out.
I love
Not a
it.
fan of this.
I love the crawling on the wall down the stairs
Yes.
too. Ah, that
I mean,
was
I was thinking about that too. It seems kind of silly. Why doesn't she just run up the stairs? I don't know
it's
why
not
she
as
has to go on the wall.
scary.
I guess, but I just feel like it'd be quicker to just go up the stairs. But
Certainly
anyway,
would.
we go back upstairs, and the Ouija board is back on the table. The same one they put in the furnace.
Damn it.
Damn it. They tried so hard. Alice flies backwards, and Lena gets pulled up by her hanging boyfriend. This part had me
That was
laughing.
so weird. I did not
why.
expect that.
No. So then Doris climbs up the wall towards Lena. There's a whole thing about how she needs Lena and that Alice tries to sacrifice herself, but
Yeah.
she says something about you're not, I don't know, good enough or something. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
this one's a
Oh,
better
that Lena's a
vessel.
better vessel. That's what it was. Yes.
Yeah.
Then Doris comes up behind Alice and says, "We'll take all of you." Ha ha ha. And then we see her dragging Alice again with the creepy face. And this where it gets kind of not confusing, but there's just kind of a lot going on. So Lena is picked up by her dad and laid in her bed before her dad disappears. Then she picks up the doll, sees the scene from earlier playing out, and she has an idea. She has a revelation. She looks at this doll and thinks, I know what to do. Meanwhile, Alice is chained in the basement, and Lena pieces it together that in order to stop the voices, she needs to now sew Doris's mouth shut. So she whacks Doris with a chair, and Lena gets on top of her and sees a light in her mouth. I didn't quite get this. Was this the demon?
Not sure what caused it, but this scene ended up being pretty silly.
Oh, the sewing? Oh my
off the
gosh.
chain.
The way that they filmed this made this look so goofy. Like it was not scary at all. Like there's demons on Lena's like back, kind of like trying to stop her, as I understood it. And she's just like got this like needle and thread, and she's just like thrashing,
They're like,
and you
yeah,
don't
they're like
see
wrapping
anything.
all around her. It's
Yeah.
and you see way too much of them now. They just look silly
Yes.
now.
This scene 100% took me out of this movie. If I
Yeah.
thought anything was creepy, this was just like, nope, this is goofy as hell. But I guess she completes it. She finishes sewing up Doris's mouth, and Doris gets up then, and her dad holds her hand. Alice is still chained to the table, and Doris is back on the ground with her mouth sewn shut. Alice pulls her hands out of the handcuffs, which I'm like, ouch, that's gotta hurt like
There
hell.
were some like breaking bone sounds as well.
Ugh.
Nice Foley work.
Definitely. Yeah, I could appreciate good Foley work. She checks Doris's pulse and thinks that she's dead. Lena said she had to do it to stop the voices. Then Lena's eyes go white and she stabs Alice. I was
Here we
not
go.
necessarily expecting that. And then I like this. Alice mutters, "It wasn't you," as she dies, which I appreciate that. She was kind of like absolving Lena of what she had just done. Alice looks up and she can now see her husband and Doris and says, "Everybody's waiting."
Oh,
I thought this was kind of, I don't know, this kind of got me. It was kind of sad.
it was kind of a Hill House ending.
Yes, very much so. These kind of endings always get me. So then we flash forward to a psychiatrist's office, and he is asking Lena where Doris is. And Lena says that her mom may know, but the guy just keeps reminding her, we've been over this. She's dead because of you. So Lena is clearly just obviously traumatized, totally confused about what happened in the house. And then she says,
Really, the only thing that I can say about my mother is that she wanted to know that we weren't alone after my dad died. And now she knows. We were never alone. I'll never be alone. I'll never be alone again.
so yeah, she's fucked. Sadly.
Yeah.
Back in her room, she pulls up the carpet, she cuts her finger, and she uses the blood to create a Ouija board to communicate with Doris. She asks if Doris is there, but gets no answer. Then the doctor walks past her room, and we see Doris in there with Lena. Then he kind of walks back, and Lena's standing straight, looking out the window right at him. And then all of a sudden, we see Doris scuttling across the ceiling.
Oh my God, I love it.
And scene. This was a good one, I gotta say. And there is a post-credit scene, so this is not the end. Did you see the post-credit scene?
Well, as soon as I got to the credits, I was like, oh, the Ouija font in the credits is a lovely touch. And then after like the most biggest credits, it started doing this thing where it looked like it was actually rolling. You know, like how it used to be a big roll of paper. I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I was like, wait a minute, Lin Shaye was supposed to be in this movie. Where's Lin Shaye's scene? So I was like, it's got to be after the credits.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just sat there and then I was like, blink and you miss it. It's a really fast.
Super fast. Yeah. We basically get a person in a wheelchair from behind looking out a window. And then Miss Sander has a visitor. It's her niece. She turns around and smiles. I don't know what they were trying to do with this, but when they show her from behind, the Miss Sander, she's wearing like a veil. And then it slowly disappears as they zoom in on her until she's just has her normal like white hair.
I interpreted it to mean I actually thought they were like kind of showing like a long period of time elapsing because you remember how Lena had such long hair and it was kind of reddish brown. Yeah. So like I think that was just the long period of her sitting around.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe that's
getting old. Yeah. I mean, that was my interpretation anyway.
This connects this movie to the 2014 movie in which Olivia Cook's character goes to see Miss Sander. So
yeah,
wasn't necessary, but it doesn't necessarily hurt the movie or anything like that. It's just quick little scene. So that is officially the end of Ouija: Origin of Evil. How did you think the ending was? Do you think they got the ending right?
In general, yes. I love me a good dark ending. I thought the Lena sewing scene was silly with the demons holding her. Also thought like just in general with all of that third act action, like people got thrown across the room a little too often. I mean, that move gets old. And then the scene with young Lena and the psychiatrist like almost ruins it for me because for some reason I did not buy the psychiatrist character. He just sounded really unrealistic. Like that is not how you talk to a child patient, you know, like who's been through trauma, even if they committed a murder. Like it just didn't sound like he was like scolding her.
It was the 60s, right? I mean,
60s.
maybe it's just commenting on that. I don't know.
Yeah, it could have been, but it took me a little out. Then the final scare, though, for me, that was perfection.
What's that? The post-credit scene, you mean? Or
before that, the
her skittering
on the
across the ceiling.
Yeah, love that shit. Love me some demon kids.
Give me some demon kids. There you go. That's the quote of the episode. Give me some demon kids.
What did you think?
I thought it was fine. I thought, like you said, with all like the fighting, those scenes get very tedious for me. I think you can try to do some cool stuff with them, and I thought this one was very paint by numbers kind of. I don't know. It's fine. I don't have an alternative ending that I thought would have worked better necessarily. So, you know what it is? It's a good like movie theater ending. I feel like this would look okay on a big screen. You know, there's a lot going on. It's lit enough where it's not like pitch black and you can't see anything. It's fine. I'm gonna go with it's fine. It didn't blow my mind, but good enough. Does that take us to our rating of this film?
Let's rate this film.
Let's do it. Do you want to go first?
Okay. This was a pretty decently scary movie. I like that it helps me make my point that a PG-13 can have some good scares. If none of that scares you, I think that's just on you. I think you kind of have to choose to go along for the ride and be open to the scares. I just prefer to watch movies like that. I liked the Demon Kid. Lulu Wilson is very strong kid actor. I could see why she has done so much work in horror. It was a nicely made film. It looked nice, good sound. Music was nice. That was then recycled into Hill House.
Mm-hmm.
I have a special place in my heart for this type of movie. Like, just give me this story over and over again, as long as they're in, slightly different fun ways, and I'll pay money for it. So, solid 4 screams from me.
Wow.
Does that surprise you?
I mean, not based upon what you just told me, that makes sense, but a little bit. Okay, I think we might have our first schism here. This is exciting.
Uh-oh.
So I will start with the good because I like to
Yeah.
start off with some positives. So I liked the dynamic of the 3 females, Alice, Lena, and Doris, and how it changed throughout the film. I liked the few scenes where Doris is interacting with other kids, like I talked about, and also the scenes with Mikey. I thought those were the strongest scenes in the movie, and I wish they would have done more stuff with that. This film felt very contained to the house, which I get. That's kind of a big part of the story, but I just felt like there was just a little bit too much of that. I wish they would have kind of expanded things out a little bit. Brought up some interesting topics of Catholic faith versus, the occult, and can they both deliver the same amount of comfort to the believers, stuff like that. I will say I realized pretty quickly that this movie was not made for me. More so than the original, the 2014. That one was really, I would say, not made for me.
You are not the audience for that.
No, definitely not. But I'm trying to look at it through the lens of its target audience, which I think would be largely teenagers, generally speaking, not to paint everyone with the same brush. But this might be the first film we've covered where I felt like there were no standout performances. The mom, I really did not like. I don't know what it is about her. I was not getting, and I wish they would have just had Kate Siegel play that role, honestly. But then I also looked up, and I think she was filming Hush at the same time, which I'm guessing may have precluded her from being the main in this. But anyway, I just she didn't grab me. The mom, she didn't move me at all, sadly. The daughters they were just okay.
Did you like Shirley and Hill House? Either one of them?
Yeah. I haven't seen that movie in a long time, to be honest. I'd have to go back and review. But the daughters, they were just okay. Like I said, they had some moments, Doris had some really good monologues, which I loved. Lena was fine. Father Tom, I just really didn't like. I didn't buy him. His character I didn't like very much. I don't know. And maybe I might be biased
Gerald's
because
game.
I was going to say, I really
Yeah.
hated him in Gerald's game. So maybe that's, he played bad very well in Gerald's game, but maybe I'm still got the ick factor. Anyway, I was surprised to learn that this was directed by Mike Flanagan. I actually didn't know that till I finished watching it because I like a lot of his movies and shows, like we've already mentioned, Hush, Gerald's Game, Midnight Mass. Those were all fantastic. And I kind of got the impression that he was given this prequel with kind of a silly premise and was tasked with trying to save this franchise that had just bombed because he's been just knocking it out of the park.
I got that feeling too.
Yeah, right? We need someone that can deliver. And yeah, if you're going to get anyone, he's the guy. The 70s aesthetic just did not work for me despite his attempts. I appreciate they tried to do it. It didn't take for me. I just couldn't believe it. And it's actually funny, when I was editing our first Omen episode, you had mentioned in your review how the lighting and the cinematography was done so well that it truly conveyed the 70s aesthetic. And I totally agree with you. That was how it can be done right. This movie is just so far below that in terms of how effective it was in my mind. Again, just my opinion.
Kind of an unfair comparison, though.
Well, it did have 3 times the budget, because I think this is a Blumhouse movie, right? Which those are notoriously low budget. So maybe I'm just picking nits there a little bit, but
they tried.
I don't totally dislike the movie. I honestly gave it a generous 2.5 screams.
Oh.
I wonder how teenagers felt about this movie when it came out. Like, did they like the Lena character and like the door? Like, did they relate to those characters? Because I don't know. I just felt like they didn't have any relationship together. Like Lena and Doris, they just felt like they coexisted in a house, and like I didn't really get like the sisterly feel from them. I don't know.
That's a
There was
good
just
point.
something missing.
Yeah.
But overall, like I said, a generous 2.5 screams. So I think this is our widest margin yet. So we
How
have 4
interesting.
to 2.5. But hey, that's what I love about this podcast, because we all view things a little bit differently. Do you know, are they going to make any more of these? Are there rumblings?
It really felt open for, another story, right?
Yeah. This was 2016, right? And then the other one was 2014. So it's been a while. I mean, we're talking
Been a while,
8
but
years.
you know how they do.
Yeah. They're keeping it in their back pocket.
Maybe they'll reboot it, because that's the other thing
Ooh.
they do, Let's make
That's
it again.
true.
I don't know. Maybe they'll wait and see like how successful they think Tarot was.
Oh, yeah. Was Tarot just a standalone movie? That was the first one of its kind?
It was a standalone movie, but like really same concept, right? Like
Yeah.
they play some tarot cards, they open a portal, bad shit happens. Although like having the 8 different monsters was like kind of a unique take on it, I guess.
In which one?
Oh, in tarot. Like they had one
Oh, okay. I was
monster
gonna say,
for
I didn't.
each of the
I thought you were talking about this movie. I'm like, I think I missed something.
Nope, different movie. Sorry.
I will say, at least I watched the correct movie this week. So I think right there, I'm already,
Nice.
knocking it out of the park. There was no Congolese movies that, interfered with my viewing.
Glad to hear it.
Stacy, would you like to let our listeners know what they're in for with our next series?
Well, folks, we're putting the brakes on the Holy Roller Coaster. That has been our 2-part series entitled Priests and Prequels. We've been blessed, we've been exercised, but now it's time to unlace the cassocks and get on board with the new cursed category for the next 2-parter. As we say farewell to our clerical companions and belabored backstories, let us pause and consult our trusty Ouija board for some divine inspiration, shall we? Spirits, can you hear me? Is it just me, or does the planchette seem to have spelled out "fuck the patriarchy"? Well, that figures, because we're casting off the misogynistic shackles of old guard fascism and rolling the dice on our next 2-episode adventure, Patriarchy, the Party Game.
Yeah.
The first card in the game we drew is the Spanish film Veronica, or Veronica.
Oh, you said that really nicely.
Get ready. I'll say a lot of nice things next time. 2017, based on true events, listeners, featuring yet another young lady with a Ouija board, which is technically a board game, legally, according to Hasbro. Fun fact, Ouija in Spanish is pronounced Ouija. Ouija. Isn't that fun?
I like that.
Anyway, whether you're a board gamer, a patriarchy smasher, or both, we thank you for listening. And now it's your move. What will you do? We hope you will subscribe, rate, and leave us a friendly review. That would be a winning move for sure. But whatever you choose, we hope you will join us next time on The Podcast Compels You as we review Veronica.
Stay scary.
See ya.